right here from Mebane, North Carolina, and I wanted to see how everybody was doing this morning. Um, we have actually had a little bit of a shorter. The heat is not there. It's not hot like it was before, and I don't know. I don't know why or what or what. This is this is what we're doing right now. I'm trying to talk to a guy named Tudor. Let me see if I've got it real quick. All right, let me see. Six. How is everybody this morning? Three. All right. Hey there.
Hey, what's up, man? I didn't know this was on mobile, so I had all my studio stuff ready. Looks like the image froze a little bit.
There he is.
There, it froze for a little bit, so I don't know what that was about. Yeah, I got it off Amazon. So yeah, yeah, correct. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah, I was 5 years old when we moved here. Yeah, I would say so. I've been in Arizona ever since. Yeah, we were Eastern Orthodox. I'm not Eastern Orthodox anymore, but we Romania is largely Eastern Orthodox.
Okay. And so, but now you said you're no longer Eastern Orthodox. Is that right?
No, no, I do
What
not.
inspired the change? What inspired the change?
I mean, I would say just life events. I have a testimony on my website that people can read. I have a statement of faith on my website that people can read what I believe and what drives my decisions. But I was raised in the church. I was very active in my church, and then I went to college and got into the whole new age personal growth scene, and that lasted for several years, especially doing what I was doing with my professional athleticism in ballroom dancing, competing and traveling the country. It was, those kinds of ideologies really matched what I was doing at the time. And eventually, things just took a turn for the worse, like you hit rock bottom. And of course, when you
Yeah.
hit rock bottom, that's when you realize that God has you in his hands. And that's what happened to me. And so ever since 2021, it's been a very different life.
So this has been sort of a recent thing.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, 2021, I had a very significant situation. And then in 2022, I lost my voice early in the year for like 9 months. I couldn't really speak. So that was another thing that basically helped me get closer to God and pray. And I wrote my fifth book during that time. And that book
Okay.
was kind of like the the template for all the other things that I eventually started doing, which is Bible studies and articles and things like that. So in 2022 of October of 2022, that's when I pretty much started doing YouTube, and it's been pretty good. Praise the Lord for that.
Well, and I can tell you one thing, brother. Your YouTube channel has absolutely blown up. I mean, right now you've got over 13,000 subscribers, and some of the subjects that you talk about are, they're. I think it's really opening up the minds and the hearts of the people out there. But it's, not everybody agrees with it. But I know one thing after watching a lot of what you're talking about on your channel, that you don't come up with anything and you're not going to share something on your podcast unless you've thoroughly researched it completely. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't want people to take my word for it. I ultimately want people to evaluate the evidence. I think that God has given us plenty of evidence, and if you look at throughout the Bible, He is very generous with giving people evidence. He wants us to have evidence for our faith. He doesn't want us to have blind faith. I think that the problem that you tend to see is that people, like in the Old Testament where you had Korah's rebellion, or even in the New Testament, with basically the Pharisees, the major sin in the Bible is the sin of unbelief, which is choosing to disbelieve even when you're presented with overwhelming evidence. I think that's the major sin that the Bible outlines. And so ultimately, I think God wants us to have evidence and to base our faith on evidence. Christianity is a very evidence-based faith. And so everything I do is very detailed because I want it to be a resource. I want it to be, not my word, but ultimately you're looking at history, you're looking at what the Bible says, you're looking at physical evidence, and so on. So
Well, the subject is biblical cosmology, and that's what we were going to talk about today. And we were taught about, so we were not. We just said we were taught, hey, this is the way that it is, and there's no other view to something called flat Earth, where everybody talk about it. And flat Earth theory, or the people who were promoting. And one of the things that got me into this is that if it's so bad, if it's so silly, then why are you trying to suppress this? But when did you find out about? When did you really open up or learn about biblical cosmology? How long has it been for you?
I would say since 2020. That's when I started
Okay.
the journey of that whole thing, and it's just been an ongoing journey ever since the last 4 years.
Okay. What got you? I mean, what got you interested, or what got you on the journey?
I can't even remember. I think I saw some video and it was really interesting. I think it was by a guy named Ewar Anon. It was
Mm-hmm.
a series of videos, and it was called what where gosh, what was it called? I forget the name of the series. It was a big series that he made. It had some interesting things in it, and it made me think, and I'm like, maybe I've been lied to more than just about the jib jab and the COVID and everything else. Maybe there are other things that they've lied about. And I just went down that rabbit
Yeah.
hole, and I really did my due diligence because for me, sci-fi was like, I love sci-fi. I loved space travel. I loved, all of these things. And so I really did my due diligence to make sure that this is actually the truth, that we don't live on a spinning ball and we're flying through space at a million
Right.
miles an hour. So yeah, it's been a real journey. And at the end of that journey, or I'm not saying I'm at the end of it, but towards the more recent time, I've also realized that the current notion of the flat Earth, which is this circle, I don't think that's accurate. And I'm going to be doing a cosmology series coming up very shortly, and I'll be talking about because the circle map is not possible for many reasons. The Earth is definitely a plane, that's for sure, and that's easy to prove. But as far as the orientation, I think it's a mystery. I really do. And it's like a lot of things that, everything that you study is ultimately a mystery because the creator who made it is mysterious. He's self-existent, he's omniscient, omnipotent, he's spirit. I think the very nature of God is very mysterious in that sense. And so everything he creates will ultimately come down to a mystery. We still don't know how life works. We don't know how life exists and how it goes from inanimate things like proteins to cells that just do their own thing. I mean, that's a profound mystery. So I've come to the point where I'm content knowing that I'm not on a spinning ball and that it's not what I've been told and lied to, and the whole sci-fi alien stuff
Okay.
is just nonsense. At the same time, I'm also content knowing that I don't know what the whole system looks like because there are a lot of proofs against the circle map that debunk it, that just don't, like for example, a simple one is the fact that if the sun goes on top of the earth in a circular pattern and the day remains the same, right? So it's always 24 hours in a day. That doesn't change.
Right.
Well, think about it from the perspective of the circle map. When the sun is, for us, in summertime, it comes to the center of the circle and it has a much smaller quote unquote orbit, right?
Okay.
According to the circle map, versus when the southern hemisphere has its summertime and the sun is on the outside of the circle map, according to that model. Well, if you do the math, the sun has to be traveling in order for that to maintain the same amount of time, meaning 24 hours. What that means is the sun has to change speeds as it's traveling through the sky by like three times faster when it's over, the southern half of the circle, which is not what we observe. The sun doesn't move three times faster when it's winter here in the northern hemisphere and summer in the southern hemisphere. So it's impossible. Same thing with the moon. The moon has the same thing. It's got its own cycle and everything, but it goes in circles. And so if it's spiraling in and out of the circle, then the speed of these celestial bodies would have to increase enormously because the day stays the same, that the time doesn't change. And so that's not what we observe. You also have situations where you have, like, for example, these ancient temples that the pagans built where they align with the sun on like the equinox or the solstice. I forget the name of the temple, but I have it documented in my cosmology series. It's basically this giant temple, right? And it's got these little holes in it that are on top of each other. And it's designed
Mm-hmm.
in such a way to where, they worship nature and the creation. And so for them, when it was like the equinox or the solstice or whatever, the sun would go through each of these holes. So the sun would, in the morning, it would go through each of these holes, up, 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 up until it passed overhead. And so that was a special alignment that they would build to go with this particular day of the year. But the problem is that's not possible. That's not possible on a circle map because the circle map says that the sun moves in a constant circle. Do you understand? And that's a problem because if you're looking in the sky, the sun actually moves in a straight line. It doesn't go on a diagonal. The buildings that these pagans have built would not be possible, and they wouldn't be able to do what they're doing if the sun was moving on a continually circular path. It's not possible. And yet what we see is a straight path. And so you have these types of things and many other confounding problems, which really, that's why to me it's a mystery, because if the Earth isn't a circle, you see, the problem is people use the circle map and it seems like, okay, that makes sense because it's continuous. What if the continuity of the Earth is not what you think it is? What if it's something so much more profound than we could ever imagine? I mean, we have video games today where, for example, you have a character and you're walking through these, what they call them, open world games, where they're basically these digitized worlds, and the computer doesn't hold into memory the entire world. It just generates the world as you're walking through it, so it has a sense of continuity, but it's not holding on to all that memory all at once. And so what if the Earth is a square or a plane, and it just goes forever and ever and ever, and it just generates based on us being around? I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of theories that I'm going to explore in my series, but the proof definitely proves that it's not a circle. So then what are you left with? You're left with an incredible mystery, because how can it be a square or any other shape besides a circle that doesn't have continuity? How does it have continuity? How can I go from east to west and just keep doing that, and just do that forever if I wanted to, and have continuity? How does that work if it's not a circle? It doesn't make sense. The circle people make fun of the globe people, that with the airplanes you have to basically constantly nosedive to go around the curvature, which makes sense. Like, you don't
Right.
nosedive, you don't experience constant free falling. But the same is actually with the circle. People don't realize that. Like, when you're going east to west, they're like, "Oh yeah, it's just continuous." It's like, no, it's not. You're having to constantly veer to the right or to the left if in that model. And yet people don't do that. They go straight. They go completely straight. And so like, how does that work on a circle map? It doesn't. Because otherwise you'd have to continuously move to the right if you're going west or whatever, depending on the direction you're going. But you'd have to continuously veer either to the left or to the right, which does not happen. People go straight. And so you have these major problems with the circle map. So we'll see. We'll explore it in my series.
Yeah, there was we got a message from says Collins Creative Solutions, and he says that NASA owes us a lot of money. We to recruit an army, and he's Isaiah 11:12, and it says, and gathered the dispersed of Judah from the four corners on the four corners of the earth. So, what do you think of that comment from
Yeah,
the
I
comment
think
section?
one of the things I'm going to be looking at in my series is ancient views of the Earth, and we're going to look at, like, I think 12 or 15 different cultures, and how did they visualize cosmology. And what you'd see, astoundingly, what you see, which is very interesting because it confirms the Bible, is that you see all of these cosmologies involved a square understanding of the Earth and a circular understanding for the heavens. So there's some sort of dome, right? Or firmament. Somehow I'm not 100% that it's
Hmm.
a dome or
Hmm.
a perfect dome, because the Bible doesn't say dome. It just says firmament, and the word there ends because there's refraction going on. Because the position of the sun, if you have a local, people have done this actually, it's really fascinating. People have recreated Eratosthenes 1,000 years ago or whatever, that supposedly proved the Earth was a ball. Well, the
Sure.
problem with Eratosthenes that people don't realize is that he ignored refraction. So he basically he measured these shadows in different places. And when you measure three shadows, the problem is that the angles don't coincide. And people can look into this. I believe Decimal Z on YouTube. Decimal Z is a channel that he has a refutation of the experiment of Eratosthenes' wells and measuring the shadows. He basically recreated that, and proves that if you ignore refraction, what happens is that you can create a ball using math from a table. So you have a table and he has a local light source, and in front of that light source he has like a lens that basically creates like refraction for the light when it comes through, like the firmament with the solar bodies. And what happens is that creates uneven shadows. So you can't, but what's the point? The point is you can't triangulate the position of the sun because of the lens, because of the refraction. If you have 2 points, it's, not too bad. But if you have three, they always mismatch. And so Eratosthenes concluded that, well, the earth must be curved because of that. And so they basically make the rays of the sun straight as a result. So they apply all of the curvature that's in the
Hmm.
lens, they apply it to the earth. And so that's how you get the ball model. But it's proven that if you ignore refraction and you transfer that onto the curvature of the earth, that you can basically take a table, a flat situation, and by using math, you can turn it into a ball and everything works out fine mathematically because you ignored refraction and you ignored the variable there that never was counted for. And of course, the globe people love refraction. That's their favorite argument. Oh, refraction, this refraction, that. Well, yeah, but that refutes the globe if you have refraction, because that means your entire basis for Eratosthenes and measuring the position of the sun is bogus because of refraction. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about with this, and of course the debate is never ending. But I do think that the Bible presents a square Earth in some way. Again, I don't know how you would have continuity. There's certainly some theories I'll look at, but that is the only conclusion, that there's a square and then there's some sort of circular heaven or dome firmament above this plane of the earth. The Bible says the earth is God's footstool. For him, it's probably just a contained situation, but it's supernatural. What if we live in a supernatural reality? Science has tried to make everything so dumbed down and basically explainable so that ultimately you don't need God in the equation. That's been the purpose of science for many hundreds of years. What if we live in such a supernatural situation that it doesn't have an explanation? What if it's by the power of God, just like with life? We can't explain life, and so I think this is no different. I think that we live in a very supernatural situation. I would love to learn more about how it works. There are certainly many questions that I have, but I also know that the flat Earth circle thing, the flat Earth movement, is a bit of a psyop. It's a bit of a psyop to control the people who are questioning and to ultimately lead them into new age ideas, into situations where, because the circle is easy to debunk, and the people who are debunking it online, they're posing good questions, but the problem is they're attacking a model that doesn't exist. And so this to me shows that this is a controlled operation in the sense that they're shuttling people into this model so that they can then get discredited easily and see, look how stupid you are for believing this, that kind of thing. Whereas, again, the Bible is much more mysterious. I think it's just a much more mysterious reality. So,
The people who do believe in the spinning globe theory, one of the you guys are crazy, and once they get over, then up into space, and they've seen the Earth, they've got pictures of all of this, so we know it's a spinning globe. How would you answer that objection?
well, I was always examine the source of the material. Most of the pictures are from NASA, which has every incentive to lie to you because they can maintain their funding, and also a track record of lying. There's so many, especially now with the internet. You can go on BitChute and just type in NASA bloopers. You're gonna find, hours and hours and hours of videos of them faking the space station and faking this and faking that, faking the moon landing. If an organization has such a track record of lying, why would you believe them? And especially if they have an incentive to lie to maintain their funding, which is inordinate. I mean, it's like what, how many millions of dollars a day or something crazy? So, I mean, it's just there's nothing but lies from NASA. So everybody else who's, if we look at, for example, amateur
Yeah.
footage, it doesn't agree with NASA. Like you have the dog cam footage that they went up to like 100,000 feet in the air and they saw nothing but a flat plane, an infinite flat plane, basically, which is a profound thought, but it's just this enormous infinite plane. That's what they saw. So how do you reconcile that? Oh, you just didn't go high enough. You didn't go high enough to see the curvature. Like that doesn't work because the problem is if it was curved by any amount, the horizon would not rise to meet your eye level. And that is an objective proof that the place that we live in is a plane, it's not a ball. Because any horizon that is curved would not rise to meet your eye level. The reason that the horizon rises to meet your eye level is because it continues forever. And so the more you rise, it just gets, more and far back. There's no deviation. If it was curved, even by a small amount, as you would go up, the horizon would drop from your eye level, and yet it continues because it's flat. So that's just a simple proof. You go up to Mount Everest or you go to sea level and it looks the same, meaning it's flat. So, yeah, that's an easy one.
And then the other thing, the other objection that I've heard people say is that, well, if I'm out on the ocean, I see a boat and the boat disappears. Now, for me, that's a pretty easy one to answer, but how would you answer that one?
Well, I mean, there's again with technology now, these things are very easily debunked because, for example, you can take a very expensive camera and you can zoom in on the sun. You can zoom in on. People have done it actually. They've watched sunset and then they've zoomed in on the sun and they brought it back into view. So that it's like reversing sunset, which is like a crazy thought. But if the Earth is a plane, then you should be able to do that. Same thing with boats. In fact, there's pictures of like bridges that are running on the ocean, and you can draw a line on these bridges, and you can draw straight parallel or intersecting lines. Everything is straight. So the question is, if you believe that the boat is going behind the curvature, then how is it possible that you have straight lines that are intersecting at a vanishing point and then suddenly it curves? That doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, just these are empirical things that I think that the problem, Mike, is that people have allowed the spell. You see, when a spell is cast, the way they cast their spells is that they do not they make it in such a way to where you don't question the assumptions. That's how the spell is cast. They give you a fancy model and they dazzle you with this and with that, and they're quick to put the explanation in. And if you aren't quick to question the assumptions being made, then you have accepted the lie automatically, and you're wrestling with it. I always say question your assumptions. What are you assuming when you say, well, but the moon is this and the earth has to be a ball? Well, what are you assuming? You're assuming a lot for that model to work. You're assuming that the Big Bang happened. You're assuming that gravity exists. You're assuming so many things. I have a video on gravity coming out shortly. We'll see, maybe in like 2 weeks or something. I don't know. But to show just how ridiculous the notion of gravity is. It's never been empirically proven or tested. It's a complete farce. It's completely contradictory to any of the laws of physics that we've identified. And not only that, but it's what binds all of the heliocentric model together. If you don't have gravity, you don't have the heliocentric model. So your entire model is based on a conjecture. That's what I would say is that you if you assume that the boats is going behind the curve, what else are you bringing into that assumption? You're bringing in XYZ. You have to prove XYZ first
Right.
exists before you can prove that the explanation for what you're seeing is a ball going or a boat going around the curve. When the empirical evidence clearly
Wow.
shows that it's not. So
Yeah, well, there was somebody, they were actually promoting the spinning ball. And I think they kind of made a mistake, Tudor. And one of the things that they said was they said, well, if you have a a flat earther debating a earther, they said that the flat earther will win the debate every single time. And I thought to myself, I wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we have empirical evidence on our side. The globe earthers have conjectures and authority on their side. They always appeal to authority. They always appeal to conjectures. And also what they have on their side, Mike, is that this is why I reject the circle model, because if you accept the circle model, then you're easy to refute. You see, there's a lot of problems with the circle model, and when the globe earthers who are a little more well read, they debunk it, but they're debunking a straw man. The circle isn't the truth. And so if you accept the circle, then you're done for, because then you have now stepped into a false cosmology and you're going to be refuted. So my advice is this: there are three main topics that are absolute globe killers, and you have to familiarize with yourself with those arguments and avoid the rest, because there's so many arguments. Oh, what about volcanoes? What about airplanes? What about, the planets in the sky? There's so many. There's so many arguments, you get lost in the weeds. The main arguments are, there's three of them. Water is always level. Not a single time we've ever seen water get curved at all, ever. And if there was a force that would be able to curve water, it would destroy everything on Earth and bend us over, because we are 98% water or whatever it is. So water being level is one of them. The fact that the horizon rises to meet your eye level no matter how high you go, that also is the second one. And gravity. Gravity has never been proven empirically. It is completely contradictory to the first and second law of thermodynamics. It contradicts everything we know about forces in physics. It's never been empirically demonstrated that the things that gravity is supposed to do actually happen, like elliptical orbits. Those are nonsense, because if you have an elliptical orbit, it means that you're basically accelerating and decelerating constantly. Because imagine if you have a circle orbit, then you have a constant rate of motion, right? That would make sense. But if you have a circle orbit, the problem is you can't have seasons on the ball. And so this is why they do the elliptical orbit, because that's how they create seasons. But if you have an elliptical orbit, what does that mean? That means you're actually accelerating and decelerating. And the Earth is moving faster at some points. And then, well, if you're doing that and you're creating centripetal force, the natural outcome, if you were to recreate this in whatever reality, first off, an elliptical orbit requires two focal points. And they say it's happening. They say it's happening with one focal point, which, again, how have you ever demonstrated that? No, they've never demonstrated that's possible. You need two focal points for an elliptical orbit, but it happens magically with gravity. Not only that, but if you're decelerating and accelerating, then think about it. As the Earth it would come close to the sun, it would go whoosh, whoosh, right? It would speed up, and so either one of two things would happen. Either as it comes towards the sun, it's going to get hurled into the sun, if this was actually happening. Or as it goes away from the sun, whoosh, all that acceleration and being propelled, it would be shot out of orbit. There's nothing to say, okay, when it comes out of this system, that it's being brought back. Like, why? Why would it do that? That doesn't make any sense. It's all just fairy tales. And so when you look at these three things, the horizon, gravity, and water, I think those are just the easiest, strongest arguments for a plane Earth. As to how the system looks as a whole, I don't make any claims about that, and I'm fine with that. I don't need to know. I just need to know that the lie is that we're on a ball, and all this sci-fi stuff and climate change and all of the things that they're using to manipulate people with, that those are lies. That's all I need to know. You just need to break the spell. You don't need to know the full truth.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting that you said what you just said about climate change, because we are constantly told that if we do not do something, turn up and the handbasket. But two, you look at the history of climate change. they made similar statements in the 1970s and in the 1980s, and they basically said, "Hey, if things don't get better in a few years, then it's going to be the end of the earth."
Yeah, they've been talking about the climate change thing for, what, 50 years now, something like that. But the thing is, one thing, Mike, that I recently talked about, which is also very important development, is that all of these secular things that they started were designed to ultimately push people back into a religio-political system. Communism was created
Yeah.
by the Jesuits in order to make Christian nationalism under the Catholic Church look like a good and rational solution, which is exactly what you're seeing now. You're seeing
Hmm.
the movement from a secular atheistic system into people wanting to swing to the right, people wanting religion back in government, people wanting religion back in schools, and a religious moral authority. Everything is becoming moral. Even climate change has become a moral issue. The Pope is all about climate change, and it's about our morality with the earth and all these things. So ultimately, these things are all converging on a particular direction. All roads lead to Rome. And so if you look at all of these things and where they're pointing to, they're really bringing the world to marvel after the beast. And eventually, it's going to be Rome telling people what to do for climate change, and it's going to be a moral issue. And if you don't do it, you're immoral, you're a heretic. And this is how it's shaping up to be. And people need to realize that the Bible warned about these things, that the future is not a communist dystopia, it's not a Muslim caliphate, it's not a Zionist empire. It is a counterfeit Christian unity of church and state, just like it was for over 1700 years. And part of that will be roping in all of these different threads. You've got the political thread going on right now with the switch from the liberal side to the conservative side. You've got climate change as another thread that's becoming moral. It used to be secular. All the liberals are now becoming religious. They're seeing objective moral truth. They're saying, "Oh, we need to be doing this for the environment because it's a moral good." There's countless little Christian organizations, and I call them Christian in quotation marks because they're just ecumenical, but Christian organizations for climate change. So it's become this moral issue. And that means that if you don't do it, and if you don't agree with it, you're not just disagreeing with policy or the state, you're disagreeing with God. You see what this is about? They always bring God into the picture. And so if you're disagreeing with God, then who are you? You have to be punished or treated as a heretic or have some sort of consequence economically because you're against God.
Hmm.
And that's the direction that society is moving. But if you know the truth
Yeah,
about the
and
earth, then you know that those things are lies. So,
well, the Bible says that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. But what I liked, which the one that I saw on um, you started to give all of these reasons why uh, the only way that I'm going to use this is this. I'm going to use the Bible for reasons of biblical cosmology. And I think that what you said, Tudor, was that you said there were 200 reasons, over 200 in the Bible that point that there's zero that point. Right?
yeah, there's zero that point to it. I mean, first off, just go with Genesis 1 alone. Again, when people assume that there's curvature, you have to say, what are you assuming if you believe that there's curvature of the earth? What are you assuming? And what you're assuming is the heliocentric model relies on the Big Bang. Otherwise, there's no explanation for planets becoming spheres. The Big Bang happened, and somehow magically things just coalesced from that Big Bang through gravity, even though gravity requires mass in order for things to work, and there was no mass, everything was dispersed evenly. So that doesn't make sense. But anyway, let's say that happened somehow magically and turned things into spheres. You're assuming all of that, but the Bible tells you in Genesis 1 that the earth was created before the sun and the moon and the stars. It gives you the opposite of what evolution says in terms of the order of the plants and animals and things like that. And so what do you do with that? What do you do with the fact that the Bible says the sun was created after the earth? That means you cannot believe in a ball earth, because a ball earth requires the sun to have been created before the earth, because the sun's gravity is the one that, wraps everything up and makes everything, kind of swirl around it and so on. It's a very, it's a sun worshiping belief system. Of course, everybody knows who studied these things that these people at the top worship the devil and they worship the sun through it. It's all heliocentric, meaning centered around the sun. Baal worship with sun worship. These people have a sun worshiping religion that they've carried through thousands of years. The heliocentric model is just an expression of that religion. But anyway, I mean, the Bible tells you in Genesis 1 that things were created in a very different order. And so if you accept that, you have a choice, basically. You have to say, okay, do I believe this? And if I do, then I'm completely against what science says. If you believe that, well, Moses was just kind of trying to explain things the best he could, well, then that means that the Holy Spirit told him to write something that's wrong. What do you do with that? That means you believe that the Bible isn't
Okay.
inspired. So either way, you got to make a choice between black or white. And so ultimately, that's the problem that people don't realize. If you accept curvature, what does that mean? Well, you accept a completely different order of events to lead up to that curvature. Curvature doesn't exist in a vacuum. Curvature exists as a result of the heliocentric explanation of how things come to be. But that explanation is completely contradictory to what the Bible says. So you have to reject it if you believe that the Bible is the Word of God. Doesn't matter what conclusions you come to. I have certainly many questions, but I have to reject it because it's wrong. I don't know the full answer, but I know that the earth isn't a ball, that's for sure.
We know that, brother.
Yeah.
We know that. And when you start to tell people this stuff, I mean, I've seen the first reaction that I get from people is almost disbelief, like you don't actually believe this, and then they start to laugh, and then they get mad, and then they try to prove it wrong, and then when you start to give them the evidence, and they start to look into it, they say, "Oh my goodness, I never knew." What kind of reactions have you gotten when you've actually talked about this to people?
I'm actually pretty surprised. The video that I released recently had overall pretty good reactions. I was expecting much more trolls and, much more naysayers. But of course, there are the people who say, "Oh, that's it. I'm done following you. I can't believe that, you would publish something like this." I'm like, "Look, evaluate the evidence. Just look at the evidence. That's all I'm asking." Another point to make with those other three that I gave you, which was water, gravity, and the horizon. The fourth point is the gospel. And what I mean by that is, if you really understand the gospel and what comes with the gospel? Well, we know the final judgment comes with the gospel. We know the resurrection comes with the gospel. We know that being created in God's image comes with the gospel. There's many things that come with the gospel, right? There are key things that you have to believe in order to be a Christian if you say that you believe the gospel. If you do not believe in the resurrection and the final judgment, then you're not a Christian. You can't say that you believe in the gospel, because the central part of the good news is that it's saving you from the bad news, which is that God is just and he's going to judge the world. And so, why is that important? Well, I go into it in my video, which covers more from a theological perspective why you can't possibly be living on a ball earth. Because if you did, again, what are the assumptions? The assumptions are there's gravity, the universe is separating faster than the speed of light, the universe is this huge place. And so, okay, well, if that's the case, then you have major problems with the gospel. How are you possibly going to spread the gospel to all of creation? If the universe is spreading faster than the speed of light, and we haven't even learned to travel outside of our planet, then we'll never reach the entire universe with the gospel. But look around you, the earth is going to hell in a handbasket.
Hmm.
So that means we're at the end. So you do the math. Either we're not on a ball or the Bible's wrong, that you have to preach to the whole of creation, right? So one of the two. I'm going to put my money on the Bible that the Bible's right, and so ultimately we're not living on a ball, because this is creation, and the gospel will be preached to all of creation because this is creation.
Sure.
Another
Sure.
issue is like the resurrection. If you have all of these intelligent life forms on different planets, then God, being just, has to judge them because I'm sure they've sinned. Nobody is free of sin. If you have intelligence, then you are by default going to sin because that's just the nature of the game. So what is God going to do with all these aliens? Is he going to judge them? Are they made in his image? If not, why not? Why are they intelligent? Obviously they can travel through space, so that means they're intelligent enough to build ships, so that means they probably sinned with pride, with lust, with envy, with murder. What's he going to do about that? Is he going to judge those other planets? How long is that going to take for him to judge an infinite amount of planets? What about the resurrection? Are these people going to be resurrected and are they going to come to earth to do it? Because Jesus is coming to earth to do the resurrection. I mean, it just gets crazier and stupider the more you think about it because the gospel is about a creation, and that creation is local. So, like when Jesus says, every eye will see him, well, that can't happen on a ball. People say, oh, well, he's going to be on TV. No, that would be maybe an impersonation of Christ, if anything. If you're seeing the return of Jesus on your phone and you're not looking up in the sky and you're seeing him come down from the firmament, that's probably going to be a false sign and wonder and a hoax because that's the only way that they could counterfeit such a thing is using technology and to make you think like, oh, Jesus is here. Because if Jesus arrives, it's going to be unmistakable. The firmament will open. However, that's going to work. There's going to be thunder and lightning across the entire sky, and every eye will see him because we live on a plane. So you can't miss it. And of course, that's not possible on a ball. So all of these things in relationship to the gospel, which is the fourth point, they don't match on a ball. And so again, you have to question your assumptions. Otherwise, you get the spell cast over your eyes.
For sure, man. For sure. Yeah. And when I think about this, man, I look at all of the. Are you there,
Yeah,
or did
I'm
I
there.
lose you?
No, I'm there.
Okay. Or you have, um, and it's been very well thought out, but it also gives hope, man. I mean, because when I went to college, I went to Appalachian State University up in Boone, North Carolina. And what the professors told us is they said, look, you can either believe science, you can believe what all the scientists are saying, which is the truth, or you can believe in some fairy tale. And I think we've learned a lot over the last few years about trusting the science. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I don't trust the science.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't trust it at all. I think that God
Yeah.
gave us a mind, an analytical mind. I think that science ultimately should be done to reveal the glory of God and
Yeah.
to reveal the mystery of the universe. But science has been weaponized against God and against, the truth. And so that's just a given. You have to do your own science.
Hmm.
That's the key.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Tudor. I know you've got to run, man. You're a busy guy. You were telling me you pretty much do this full time now. But if people want to check you out, you've got your YouTube channel is what?
Dance of Life podcast with Tudor Alexander.
Dance of Life podcast. So make sure to subscribe to that. You said you've written several books. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, they're on my website. If people are members there, they can have them for free.
Okay. And you said your website. What is your website?
Danceoflife.com.
Danceoflife.com. And just take a look at this. You've done at least one video on biblical cosmology. Is that right?
Yeah, as of the time of this video, we have a couple more weeks, and I'll probably start my cosmology series in about 3 weeks.
Okay. And are there? I know you had mentioned somebody when you first looked into this. Is there anybody that you would recommend other than yourself on looking into biblical cosmology? Any other names out there that you would trust?
Um, there's an interesting documentary called Heliosorcery. I forget who it's by, but you can find it on YouTube. I think actually it's still up, or BitChute. but it's a great documentary on the political and just like the subversions of the Vatican and how basically they shaped cosmology for the last 400 or 500 years as a way to destroy the Protestant Reformation and to bring everybody back to Rome. Very interesting documentary. It's called Helio Sorcery.
Helio sorcery. Well, we'll have to check that out, brother, and make sure to check out Tudor Alexander. And appreciate you coming on, and we hope to do it again soon. Okay.
Sounds good, buddy. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
See.